Oh, happy Thanksgiving. You know, Tony Robbins said what we did this morning with our first song and what we do every week. He calls that changing your state. When you put yourself in that high vibrational state, what are you doing? You're making a defined decision not to be in the thoughts of what A Course in Miracles calls the ego mind, but to be in the thoughts which are in alignment with our inner divine knowingness, our Christ consciousness that is in us all the time. And we stir up the gift within us when we do that. Stirring up the gift within us, yes, we each have individual gifts and talents, and those are a blessing that we are born with in this incarnation. But additionally to that, we have the 12 powers, and we stir them up. Everybody has that within us, and it is incumbent upon us to stir it up. I love what the Bhagavad Gita says about gratitude in chapter 18, verse 62. The Bhagavad Gita says, surrender exclusively unto God with your whole being, O Bharat. He's speaking to a follower, Bharat. By God's grace, you will attain perfect peace and abide in that eternal state. By God's grace, we attain perfect peace and we abide in that state. The choice we make to surrender to that ego mind, which tells us what we're not and how bad it is and all that stuff, right? The choice we make to surrender that and to live in our divine alignment with our Christ consciousness always flowing in us and through us, that is what brings us to that eternal state of peace and experiencing grace. In Genesis 6, chapter 6, verse 8, there's a frequently misunderstood verse about the grace of God. It says, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. It's interesting how in traditional Christianity, they frequently say that means Noah somehow had some special dispensation of grace that you and I don't get. Noah got it, but not us. Okay? That's not at all what it means. Listen to the terminology. And when I was studying Hebrew at Baptist Bible College in Springfield, Missouri, I was very interested in this verse because the terminology specifically means something completely different, which in our metaphysical community as members of Unity thought system, we know this. What it really means, what the traditional Christians think is that it's special just for him, right? But here's what it actually means in the original language. Noah recognized that grace is in the eyes of the Lord. Incumbent upon us is to see that the character of God is grace. What is grace? Unearned favor. You don't have to deserve it by being a good little girl or good little boy like the Santa Claus story. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to earn it by always being in good feelings like some law of attraction teachers teach. Because underlying the thought that you have to earn it by always having good feelings is the underlying limiting belief there is that the universe is not benevolent. Limiting belief is just a limiting thought that somehow you have to deserve it, you have to earn it, or else you're just not getting it. But the fact is, it's always flowing to all of us all the time, and we get to stir it up by recognizing it. The beauty is that the more grace we see in our lives, the more we will see. The more we recognize, oh wow, that was a bounty, that was a blessing that welled up in my life and just blessed me, just came out of nowhere and blessed me. The more we see that in our lives, all those little things and all those big things, because it's across the gamut, isn't it? Sometimes it's a moment, which A Course in Miracles calls the holy instant, where you look into somebody's eyes and you know there's no separate intentions. They are a divine being just like us. That was the grace of God, that holy instant. It can be that small and yet important. And it can be as big as an angel experience, which I had when I was 15. I'll tell you a little bit about at the end. But the fact is, those big things aren't the only thing it is. It's everyday grace. All of us, all of the time, are experiencing that grace. In the Old Testament, in Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 8, it says, God tells the people, build a memorial. And he says it 12 different times throughout the Old Testament. Build a memorial. Build a memorial. Every time there was a miracle, every time they saw the grace of God in their lives just dropping a blessing on them that they didn't have to earn. Because if you earn it, it isn't grace. It's your co-creative power, which is, of course, also important. Since we're here to be helpful, let's be helpful. Right? But the grace of God is unearned. You don't deserve it by being good. Otherwise, God could not have chosen any of the prophets in the scripture because they were all idiots. Okay, right? The Bible reads like a bad soap opera. So the grace of God was upon them even. And the Lord maketh the sun to shine upon the just and the unjust, because the ego is the one doing the judging about what's just and unjust. God's not. God, the character of God is just always raining blessings all of the time. We stir it up. We stir up that energy. Build a memorial, build a memorial. That's what we're doing today. The Israelites were commanded to build an altar, a sacrifice of praise. They were told that repeatedly throughout their journey. And what is building a memorial and a sacrifice of praise all about? It isn't that God's on some ego trip, so you have to praise him all the time. That's not what it means. It's good for us to see and to recognize. We're told to do that because it's good for us to see it and recognize it. It's our co-creative capacity to recognize the blessings of the divine energy flowing in us and through us all of the time. And then we turn around and extend that to the world. And this makes life precious, fulfilling, joyous. Our gratitude rampage today that we're all sharing is building a memorial, so that all of us remember, no matter what you're going through, and even if it looks bad, God is doing something. God is doing something. God is doing something, and it's going to be good. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. All things work together for good. Ephesians 5:18 through 20 says, be filled with the Spirit. Notice it's a state of being. It's a state, like Tony Robbins says, that you put yourself in. You choose it. You stir it up. Be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual stories, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord, always giving thanks for all things. And this is what we're doing today. We're speaking to one another in psalms and in hymns and in spiritual stories, building a memorial to the grace of God as a reminder, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you face, God's going to get you through it. The energy of God is in you, flowing through you, pulsating through your veins, and we're going to stir it up today. And with that, I'd like to ask our first presentation to be Mary Jo, if she would. I've asked some specific people to share some stories, and at the end, we are going to open mic and let you just do a gratitude rampage. Our own tender-hearted, yes, a gratitude rampage, our own tender-hearted grace incarnate, Mary Jo Bailey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And what a glorious morning it is. This blue sky, the sunshine, and us gathering here today. And I just want to say thank you to Joy for putting this together, and thank you to everybody who's going to be speaking. I'm so excited to hear your story. And thank you, Joy, for inviting me to do this. If there's anything that I can speak to, I think it is the topic of grace. I see grace in every aspect of my life constantly. And interestingly enough, the daily word this morning, which my mom sends to me every morning, was grace. I thought it was just amazingly fitting. And it says, grace is my constant blessing. So, but yes, grace in every aspect of my life, from my home, where I live, my friends, my spiritual community, the work I do, specifically the work I do, and also my family. And I'd like to share a story about my family, particularly my parents, who I feel so gracious to be born into, or in this world of. But in the spring of 1999, I had been living in Maine for about 5 years, a little unguided, maybe misguided, and not suddenly, but I heard this voice telling me, Mary Jo, it's time to get home. And behind that even said, something might happen to your parents. It's time to get home. So at the age of 28, after 5 years of some interesting experiences, and I moved back home, and I moved back in with my parents, but that was a turning point in my life because I returned to college, got my nursing degree and a career, bought my first home, so it was a monumental move for me. That winter and into 2000, January 2000, my dad had a massive heart attack. We were actually in Cripple Creek gambling, my parents and I, and we had a big lunch. We went our separate ways to pull the slot machine handles, and after a short time, I heard over the loudspeaker Beverly Bailey come right away, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we hit the jackpot. So I make my way down, and I look out into the parking lot, and I see my dad in an ambulance, gray, pale, fighting the oxygen, and they took him to the helicopter pad and took him to Penrose Hospital in Colorado Springs, and my mom and I drove down there and called my sister and my brother. We all just immediately arrived. They told us to tell him goodbye, which we did. They were doing everything they could to keep him alive. Surprisingly, he lived for another 3 days, and doctors came in and told us, we think your dad has a great chance of survival if we get him to CU Hospital in Denver and get him a heart transplant. So that happened. He got on the list, and in 8 days he had a new heart, and he lived for 14 years after that. And those years were just filled with so much purpose and joy for him and my mom. They traveled. My dad went back to work. Well, he never stopped working. But in the hospital, anyway. And he worked up until 2 weeks of the end of his life when he went on hospice. But he was actually, I'm going to just refer to my notes, and I'm going to wrap this up. He was an amazing veterinarian, and I think he had, as we all would, maybe a bit of survivor's guilt, but I think those thoughts were always immediately followed by thoughts of blessings for the gift that he had received, which is the way we all looked at it. But not only was he an amazing veterinarian, he was also a poet and a writer, and I'd like to share one of his poems with you. He wrote this on October 22nd, 2004. He died October 22nd, 2013. And we all have this in a beautiful plaque form on our walls, my siblings and my mom. And it says, fall is here, and it really shows up nicely in the trees. Today, a warm west wind arose and blew away their leaves. Leaves of a red and golden hue, and some an earthly brown. A harvest that I will gather now and mulch back in the ground. I hope that I will live to see another crop to fall, evidence that I have lived through the magnificence of it all. A tree to me is a living staff whose leaves keep track of years, a totem and a calendar as they emerge and disappear. If I should live like a tree and bloom and fade again, I will cherish the long winter nights and look forward to each new spring. But when the spring does not occur and my limbs no longer bear, Look for me in the wind that blows in the leaves everywhere. Thank you.
We all walk in the grace of God all of the time. It was obvious that your father did as well. We all do, and the more we see, the more we will see. Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may recognize mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. What's the difference between grace and mercy? Grace is unearned favor that we're all always receiving, and mercy, so it is said that grace is when you do get what you have not earned, and mercy is when you do not get what you have earned. So we're grateful for both, because there is no retribution. There is no retribution with God. That's an ego construct. That's why we made up hell and the devil, because we secretly wish people would be punished, right? So we're grateful that we get to approach God's throne with confidence. And with that, a beautiful example of walking in the confidence of the grace of God is our powerful Samuel Basler. And I'd like to invite him up now. Samuel.
One of the neatest things of being up here is getting to see all the smiles out there. It is just such a pleasure. And when Joy called in or texted and said, speak for 3 minutes, okay, let's see if I can do that. And then she said, well, talk about miracles. Okay, I've had a few. And then deciding, how do I limit it to one? Well, no. How about two? Okay. Well, the first one is sort of a mild miracle. And some of you may remember that when last I stood here, I was talking about the most benevolent outcome. And I'm wanting to remind anybody who doesn't use that on a regular basis to start your day with, I request the most benevolent outcome for, and you fill in the blank, whatever it is, any kind of thing, any kind of test, any kind of interview, any kind of just driving to Orvis Hot Springs, asking for protection and safety as part of your request. Now, why? It's at the bottom here. It's because angels cannot assist us by universal rule unless we invite them. We ask for their assistance, for their presentation of whatever is most benevolent. Sometimes it's better than we can ask for, because they say, oh, well, let's try this. I think you'd enjoy this, which I hadn't thought of. So anyway, get in the habit of starting your day. I request the most benevolent outcome for fill in the blank, and then may be better than I can hope for, and thank you. So that's number one. Now, that's good, but that doesn't sound miraculous. That sounds standard. And what took place when I started doing this daily was every left turn arrow that I came up to turned left when I got there. Every one. And after going through this a few days, why, I thought, how do you guys do that? Do you start when I do in the morning, or do you punch some kind of ethereal button, and as I come up to the green arrow, you just, and it's there. And then I would start laughing because it's funny and fun and again and again and again. So it's the laughter and it's the happening that now it doesn't do that so much now. But when I first started this most benevolent outcome, it was joy coming through. Just a delight. And I'd start laughing and I'd say, how do you? Well, okay. Anyway, I like it this way. But that's kind of how my life flows, what I call fifth dimensional living. But I wanted a miracle. A miracle to me is something that defies the physical. In other words, a thing that doesn't act like it's supposed to. And so I came up with in mid-'80s, when Religious Science Center was on 17th and Glenwood. Yes, where there was a group of us, maybe 10 of us, had come for an evening event of some kind. And the person who was to let us in and bring the key and all was not there yet. So we were milling around, just all chatting, because we're friendly folks and we all have lots to talk about. And so then Judith Marie said, I just locked the keys in my car. Oh. Where's your extra key? I guess at home. And so we all thought, okay, well, do we call the locksmith, or what do we do about keys locked in the car? We don't want to break a window and do all of that. And so anyway, we kind of thought about it, and then I just walked over, put my Toyota key in her Mazda car, turned it, and the door opened. Wow is right, because I tried, and she just reached in, got her keys, all is well. And then I tried a little later, Toyota, Mazda, nothing. Wouldn't move. Nothing like that. To me, that was a physical miracle, because things didn't work like they were set up to work. We had a moment of magic. And so, to me, miracles are magic. And I get to experience lots of magic. Thank you all.
And that's an example of abiding in that eternal state, staying in it all the time. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Samuel. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 through 18. Rejoice always. Pray continually. State of being. Rejoice always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you. Now, this is another frequently misunderstood passage. In traditional Christianity, they think that it means whatever's going on in your life, God wanted it to be that way. That's actually not what it means. Let me read it again. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. For this, giving thanks in all circumstances, is the will of God for you. The attitude of gratitude, the attitude of rejoicing always, the attitude of praying continually. That's actually what it means is the will of God for you, not whatever's happening in your life. We do that stuff, right? We can make that stuff happen. Or it's just the random stuff that happens in the universal chaos, right? So whatever is going on in your life, the reason why we are taught in scriptures to give thanks always is because as our wonderful minister in Unity of Houston taught us last week. And right now his name just went, thank you. Michael Gott taught us last week. Giving thanks can sometimes be transactional. Not always. Sometimes we mean it with a heart of gratitude when we're giving thanks. But it can be transactional. That's very superficial and not causal. Well, thank you. You gave me something. Gratitude, on the other hand, is causal. It is cause. It is energetic cause that co-creates blessings in our lives. And this, of course, is why we're commanded to be in this state of awareness, because it causes us to co-create good things in this world. Isaiah 12:4-5. And on that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord. Call on his name. Make known his deeds among the people. Make them remember that his name is exalted. Praise the Lord in song, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known throughout the earth. After the psalmist wrote praise in Psalms 107, let me find that one. Psalms, well, he went on a gratitude rampage. You can't find it right now. Maybe I'll read it later. Maybe I won't. But the psalmist, King David, went on a gratitude rampage. After which, when he gave thanks, and he said it repeatedly in the Psalms, then he wrote, I could run through a field. I could leap over a wall. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. This stirs up our energy, doesn't it? He could just run. He had so much energy. Energy, inner chi. It is the life force of God in us. And with that, we're going to stir it up some more and remember God's good deeds again through the words of our own Debbie Squires.
I want to thank Dr. Joy for asking me to talk about the grace of God, and I've had so many. I've got new hearing aids, so I've got to kind of, it's affecting mine. Oh, thank you. Okay, this is more than 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to move right along here. Okay, in the early 70s, I graduated from college, and had you told me, oh, in 6 years you're going to be a diesel mechanic, I would have said, oh, yeah, right, but that's exactly what happened. You see those buses in Denver that's where I worked for 34 years. Wow. And so I was a diesel mechanic, I was a union rep, I sat through 2 contract negotiations. And in 1990, I'm in my 40s, and I said it's time to get into management, get off the floor, not hurt my body so much. So I was a supervisor. Then after 10 years, 2000, I said, let's move up. Assistant manager, let's move up. I thought I'll get my feet wet and try out for this job I saw that they had posted, and they very rarely post these jobs. So I put in for it. I thought, let's just try. I took the test. Later, I got a call from the head of the department. He said, I'm not going to promote you, but I'm going to tell you, you tested so well. Please keep applying because you have potential, and we need you in upper management. So I thought, great. Well, he moved on. He retired and moved on. So as these jobs would come up, very rarely, I put in for them. And after about 4 tries and being told you aced the test, it's just the interview didn't go so well, blah, blah, blah. And I saw the person that was put in there and thought, oh, you've got to be kidding. I'm so much more qualified. And a guy took me aside and he said, Debbie, get the hint. They don't want you up there. Just, go with the flow. Move on. 2010, I'm in my 60s, and a manager's position comes up, and I said, why not put in for it? I'm getting ready to retire. Let's go out on top. Yeah. So I go in and I take the test, and I could tell something wasn't quite right. A couple of weeks later, I get a form letter. You didn't pass the test, and you won't be interviewing for the job. Good luck next time, blah, blah, blah. I thought, no. I went and saw a lawyer. I pleaded my case. She says, I think you have a case, but you got to go to EEOC and plead with them, and they will decide if you have a case. And if any of you have ever heard EEOC gets all these billions of dollars for all these people that don't want to work, that's not true. I went before them and had to plead my case. They said, eventually, they said, yes, you have a case. And we would take it because this is a case, a very strong case, but we're so overworked and understaffed. But we're going to give you the right to sue. You have 90 days. Get moving. So I went back to my lawyer. I said, here's the deal. She says, okay, I'll plead with them and try to settle this case, but you do have 90 days. And also, you need to get a lawyer on contingency to file this case. And you probably know what contingency is, but if you don't, it means that the lawyer does this for free, but when they settle, they get all your money, you know. So, but she says, I don't do that. She said, so line a lawyer up. I did. This one woman lawyer said, yes, no problem. I'll take it. I also got a counselor through Boulder Unity because I wanted to deal with this in peace and love, not anger and hate. So 90 days, my lawyer's calling me every so often, once a week, and finally she said, they're not talking anymore. They won't settle. They don't want to deal with this. So go call your lawyer that's going to file this on contingency. I called her. No response. I called the next day, no response. I'm running out of time. I'm calling every hour on the hour. Finally, she calls back. Oh, did I forget to tell you? We're not going to take this case. Find someone else to do it. So I'm out there calling. My cousin's a lawyer, and she gave me several names of civil rights attorneys. I know another woman who's a lawyer, who's a retired lawyer, and she had several names. I'm calling all these people. I have never talked to such rude people in all my life, and they're not taking my case. They're not doing that. And I'm thinking, in the late 60s, early 70s, I was marching in the streets so women could get into law school. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know. And they're, you know, this is the thanks I get. So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. My lawyer says, look, I'm going to file your case, but you're going to pay me by the hour. And you might as well put your house up for sale because that's what it's going to cost you. So I said, let's go. Let's go. I'm going to do it. And I love my house, but let's do it. Seconds later, this guy comes bursting through the door. He says, you're not going to believe this. He doesn't even work in this facility, and he's not in my department. He says, I drove all the way over here to tell you that your former boss, your former manager, has left his position, has come over to our department, and he's now my boss. And I just don't think it's fair, and blah, 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 blah. And I know you're filing a case, and I support you. And I thought, this is great, but what I'm really hearing is there's a position open as a manager, and I can put in for that. So he's going on. I said, yes, yes, yes. Then he leaves. I get on the phone with my lawyer. I said, you're not going to believe this. There's a position open for manager. I'm going to put in for it. And she says, are you sure? Is this what you want? I said, that's all I ever wanted. I don't need all this other stuff, you know. So she says, okay, I'm getting your case ready to submit to RTD. They haven't been talking to me, but I'm going to submit this. I'm going to tell them, this is what we expect. I'm filing your case in court, but there's a position open for manager, and you're going to put in for it. I said, great. So a few hours later, she calls me back. She says, you won't believe this. They're going to settle your case. And I said, wow. And I thought to myself, you know, after I said, let's go, that guy just burst through the door. I thought, this has got to be the grace of God. This has to be the grace of God. And in conclusion, I want to say, sorry, I'm a retiree of RTD. And I really appreciate, I hear so many retirees go, oh, RTD sucks, I hate RTD. RTD gives me a pension, and I live a wonderful life because of RTD, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you.
Yes. The grace of God takes care of us and provides for us in ways that it's just amazing and astounding how the grace of God comes through. When we least expect it, sometimes, boom, there it is. And sometimes we couldn't even imagine and fathom what might transpire. That's beautiful. Thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. Revelation 22:21. The grace of the Lord Jesus is with all people. Let us be aware of it. James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift, like that one, those several actually, every good and perfect gift, and your father's story, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father, we could think source, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting sand. The grace of God is the character of God. And with that, I'd like to call on our wonderful administrative master. Whew, so grateful for all she does for us, Deb Jensen.
Thank you. I love to hear all the stories and everything, and it is hard to talk about grace and gratitude without crying, because there's been so many blessings in my life that truly I don't deserve, and that is what I think grace is. And I have a hard time talking about grace without talking about how I got here at the beginning. And I know this isn't an AA meeting, but that's how I got here, and I have to say that because that is what changed the trajectory of my life. And when I was in my 20s, drunk, alcoholic, hanging out with the wrong people, in jail, out of jail, all sorts of things. And, that was my life. And I even remember thinking, it's like, I'm probably just going to be dead in about 3 years. I mean, I just didn't see any hope. I didn't see anything happening. I didn't see anything that was going to change my life. And, through people, and I think grace comes through people. There's a grace of God, but it's delivered on earth through the people around us. And I'd been going to an AA meeting, but as soon as the meeting was done, I was just right out the door, because, who'd want to hang around with a bunch of losers like them? And so, so anyways, but one night after, I just shot right out of there, and someone, Bob Rao, followed me in the parking lot, and he said, "You too can have a life in Alcoholics Anonymous." And, that just changed everything, because I had hope, and I knew that something could change, and it was an amazing thing. And so what I'm most grateful in life is the people in my life that come and go, the situations that have, and the ways things are changed. And, I shouldn't be where I'm at today. Shouldn't be if I thought about what I did to deserve it or what I did to get there. But, I'm extremely blessed with so many wonderful things and people in my life. And I hadn't even thought about this one situation until you talked, Mary Jo, but I was working at a company in Denver. My family's back in Minnesota and everything. And the man that was my boss, he had just lost his father in a car accident. And his father, was in his 80s, came around all the time and had lunch with us. And I knew him well. But it really broke him up, because they were so close and everything. And he came to me and he goes, "Deb, you need to go see your father." He goes, he just said I needed to go see my father. And so I went and I found an airplane ticket. It was cheap as can be, like $90 back then or whatever. And I went home for the weekend and saw my father, and, had a nice talk and everything. And the Tuesday after that, he shot himself and killed himself. And I was just like really grateful that I got to go there. So anyways, there's so many. That's why when you talk about gratitude, I'm just going to start crying, because there are just so many wonderful things in life that the people around have given me a life of gloriousness, and I appreciate that. So.
What Deb just expressed is a perfect lead into this verse, because she talked about AA and her association with that in the past. Romans 5:15. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. What does this mean? It doesn't mean that we are weak. It means we surrender the ego mind to the divinity, the greatness within us. Romans 5:15. 2 Chronicles 30, verse 9. For the Lord your God is gracious and compassionate. He will not turn his face from you. It's always, always, always flowing. Incumbent upon us is to see it. We choose to see it even more, to recognize it daily as we walk and abide in that state of recognition of grace. I'd like to call on our beloved John Ainsley at this time.
Well, this goes back to October 1994. I met a hell of a woman that day. She was my second wife. Yeah, okay, okay. There we go. How's that?
Yes.
Okay. I met my second wife, Lisa, in a railroad station in Seattle, Washington. We were both taking the train to Denver that day, and she came across Canada. She saw her mother in Toronto in the hospital, and she came across Canada. She originally was going to close on a house in Bend, Oregon, but that fell through. But Lisa never was one to not take a train trip, so she took a train trip. And then she came home to Denver, and then her ex-husband picked her up in Denver and even took me to my motel in Denver because I was going to stay over a day and then take the train the next day, which was kind of good. And in the next 6 years, we had a long-distance relationship, and the Holy Spirit was with us all the time with the grace. We made these appointments. We'd get together and have good times. And finally, in 2000, September of 2000, I lost a job. My contract ended, and I figured, well, let's come out here and have a life with Lisa. And we did. And it was in 17 years of very good life. And in the between time, we grew in joy and grace and so forth. And I can't say enough to what happened at that time, other than things have also proceeded to where I eventually came here, and I have another person that's in my life that's really helpful to me. Thank you.
Second Chronicles 9:15. The Lord orchestrates our comings and goings. And if that isn't a perfect example of that, when we're in alignment with the grace of God, He puts us where we need to be for such a time as this. How absolutely beautiful, the grace of God, bringing them together from opposite ends of the country. Wow. I'd like to just share briefly a grace that I receive every day. Every single day, I'm amazed that I am provided for, that I always have enough money. I don't know how to do any marketing. I'm lousy at it. I don't know how to do it. And so I just have to trust the grace of God. And in that state of trusting the grace of God, new people come to me all the time. They crawl out of the woodwork. They're just drawn. And I don't do anything to deserve it. I don't even know how to deserve it. And they just crawl out of the woodwork. I don't even remember what year it was when I was in the coaching industry. The grace of God put 14 people around my dining room table. One of them was named Joe Cater. He worked for this company called Prosper. They were around my dining room table, these 14 people, because I was teaching them how to invest in real estate. They were my property finders. They would go out and find sellers in distress and get the agreement signed with them, and I would pay them a $1,000 finder's fee for doing that for me. And then I would work the short sale, and it ended up being very lucrative. They loved it because they were learning real estate investment. Well, this man named Joe Cater, when I announced to them, I'm sorry, my husband is divorcing me, and I won't be able to have you around this dining room table because I have to move by next weekend, and all of that trauma and drama. But I was just trusting the grace of God to do something and take care of me. At the end of that last meeting with those 14 investors, Joe Cater said, I was called Janine at the time. Janine, everything I use where I work at this place called Prosper. It's on a real estate hotline for Trump University. And everything I've learned, I learned from you sitting right here around your dining room table. Everything I use on that hotline. One of our executive coaches is having a baby. She wants to go home and be a stay-at-home mom, and so we have an opening. Can I submit your name? Coaching? I don't even know what that is. Well, you've been doing it with us every week. Oh, well, sure. Submit my name. And it opened up where I worked for Donald Trump for 5 years, coaching real estate. I really did. And he is everything you think he is. And yeah, he liked me because I really did know what I was doing, and I had a rather large portfolio at that time. And so he thought I was good, and I had testimonials coming out his ears. So, because my students were profitable. But I did that for 5 years. And along the way, as they listened in to the recorded coaching sessions, the company came to me and said, we've been listening to you, and you do something to get people past their fear. When they're afraid to talk to a seller or afraid to make an offer, you do something. And we think you're the perfect coach to open our personal development genre. And we have an opportunity with a man named Dr. Joe Vitale. And I said, oh, I just finished reading his book, The Key. Literally, it had been 1 week before. God orchestrated the timing of all of this so perfectly. And so they invited me to meet with Joe, and it was an amazing first meeting because I said, I am perfectly prepared for everything that you are and everything your students will learn. Perfectly prepared. I just finished reading your book, The Key. Before that, I've been studying something called A Course in Miracles. He went, oh, I love A Course in Miracles, and we absolutely connected. And Dr. Joe Vitale, you may know who he is. He's quite famous on the internet, and he is in several of the New Thought movies, etc., the Secret, etc. Anyway, he said to me, you can't believe how good that is to hear. And it was transformative for my life to actually get to coach for him. I opened up his Miracles Coaching and coached thousands of students around the world through that. He was the lead source, and he did the marketing. And along the way, I mean, he's now at like 79 books he's written. He's an extremely prolific. Talk about the grace of God on his life. They just come like this. So the books just flow. But I was his first Miracles coach and opened his Miracles coaching program, and then trained all of his other Miracles coaches, and I did that for 7 years. And that was transformative for my life, because remember how I've shared with you that in the beginning when I first was studying A Course in Miracles, I had a love-hate relationship with it. I thought, heresy! And I kept throwing it down because I was being brought by the Spirit, lifted out of religiosity into walking with God and walking in a state of knowing God. And in that process of being brought out, sometimes I didn't understand what A Course in Miracles was teaching. I met Joe. He said 4 or 5 or 6 things to me that very first meeting, and it plugged it all in. Oh, I get what A Course in Miracles was saying now. It was amazing how it plugged it all in for me, and that was just simply the grace of God. There's no way I could have orchestrated it. There's no way I could have put it on a vision board, because I didn't know anything about personal development coaching. What is that? It was a brand new thing, a whole brand new genre. No one had ever heard of it before. And so I didn't know anything about it. I was just carried by the grace of God into that. Well, it just so happens, and this is, again, why I am a recipient of the grace of God every single day that I live. Even though I don't coach for Joe anymore, I'm just working on my own, but I don't coach for Joe. He decided to republish a book that has my name all through it. Yeah, it's called Attract Money Now. And then he's got another one called Attract Miracles. And I've got there are testimonials from students all over that book. My name's all over it. So I've got all these people every day finding me. They text bomb me and say, hey, can you coach me? Well, the agreement with the company is that if they approach me, I can certainly take the client. I can't go seeking them, but if they approach me, I can. And God drops it in my lap every day. I got 3 new clients last week. I did nothing to earn it. Nothing. It is simply the everyday grace of God. Everyday grace of God. And I am so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm going to tell you briefly another story that happened to me, and with this we'll close. This is one of those big things, but again, there's no possible way I could have earned it. I couldn't deserve it. I wasn't a good little girl. I just simply was a recipient of the grace of God. When I was 15 years old, I was living in Bergen, Norway, attending school in Bergen, Norway, and my school in Bergen, Norway sent me as an exchange student to Exeter, England, a university exchange program there. So even though I was younger than the university students, because the European school system is not identical, I was a bit younger, but they sent me to Exeter, England to live and to be an exchange student there on a summer program. As I was coming home from that summer program, I was taking the train from Exeter to London, England to catch my flight out of Heathrow. I arrived the day before, spent the night at the YWCA. At the YWCA, my suitcase, all my money, my watch, everything that I had taken off and put underneath my bed was stolen during the night. I didn't have my passport. I didn't have a ticket. I had nothing. I was 15 and a half years old, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So my little girl heart, believing in God, just said, "Oh God, I don't know what to do." That is all. Spirit said, "Get up and walk toward the airport." So I got up, put my coat on. That's the only thing I had left. Didn't have any money, didn't have any airplane ticket, didn't have any passport, nothing. And I started walking toward the airport. As I was walking toward the airport, this very kind-looking man in a yellow taxi cab slowed down in front of me. He had curly hair and he was a little bit portly. He slowed down and he looked at me. He just gazed right through me, and I was not afraid. He said, "Janine, come with me." He called me by my name. I was in that moment in Piccadilly Circus in London, just walking through because I had to walk to the airport, right? So I was in Piccadilly Circus. He picked me up. I got in the back seat of his taxi, and what was there but my suitcase? Never even occurred to me that he could have been the thief. That when you are in the presence of angels, you'll hear how this transpires, and I came to know it later. You're not afraid. There is no fear. There is no fear. It didn't even occur to me to be afraid. And he said, "I'll take you to the airport now." And so he took me to the airport, and I had my suitcase. My passport was gone. The money was gone. My jewelry was gone. Everything was gone except I had some clothes, and I did have my suitcase. He said, "Now you sit right here." We walked in the revolving doors. He said, "You sit right here, and along will come some helpers." That's what he said. So I sat there with my suitcase, and I didn't do anything, just inside the airport. I just sat there. A few minutes later, this woman who looked like, do you remember Mrs. Beasley? Do any of you remember that old-fashioned TV show with the maid-looking, old grandma maid-looking lady, Mrs. Beasley? Okay, God probably sent this angel in that, looking like that, so I would recognize that she was a sweet lady and I didn't have to be afraid, but that's what she looked like to me. And then this lurch-looking guy, huge, like 10 foot tall. He was enormous. I don't even know if other people could see him, quite frankly, but he came walking in and they said to me, "Hello, Janine, we're here to take care of you. And would you please come with us?" I walked out the door, and there was I kid you not, Rolls-Royce stretch limousine. It was silver gray color, and Lurch opened the door for me. The Lurch-looking guy opened the door, and I sat in this Rolls-Royce limousine. And they said, "Please feel free to take all the little drinks back there. You'll want evidence." I was just thirsty. So I took all the little tiny orange juices and tomato juices and all of that stuff, and put them in my suitcase. That came in very handy later. Anyway, as they took me over to the penthouse suite of the Post House Hotel, I walked into the opulence of that hotel, and I thought, if this isn't representative of the love and grace of God, here I was robbed, and now I'm spending the night at the penthouse suite of the Post House Hotel, and I'm 15 and a half years old, and I'd never seen such opulence. I grew up poor on the east side of Detroit, Michigan. And I'd never seen such opulence. I went into the shower and I'm running around, washing my hair. There were like 12 shower heads and everything's granite and marble. And I mean, I'm like, whoa! And I called my parents back in Detroit, Michigan. And I said, Mom and Dad, you know how international calling was back then? We're talking 1977, 1976, international calling was a big pain in the neck. So I called my parents. I said, Mom and Dad, you are not going to believe where I am. I want you to call me back so you'll believe me. Just call the penthouse, just call the Post House Hotel in London, England, ask information for the number, and have them put you through to the penthouse suite and see if it isn't me who answers. And so that happened, and they were like, what are you doing in the penthouse suite of the Post House Hotel? And I said, it's amazing. And of course, at that point, I was calling them these nice people. I didn't realize yet I was in the presence of angels taking care of me. And that night, room service brought me, I felt like it was everything on the menu. It was like this huge smorgasbord of everything I could have ever imagined to eat. There was every kind of roast and every kind of everything. Desserts like crazy, just a huge. And I said, I can't pay for this, you guys. And they said, oh, it's all taken care of. Anyway, so the next morning they came in the Rolls-Royce stretch limousine and picked me up at the appointed time that they had told me that they would pick me up and whisked me off to the airport. And when we got to the airport, they said, okay, come with us. And at this point, Lurch he stayed out of the car, and that sweet little old lady looking person, Angel, walked me up to the front. Now, it's Pan American Airlines. Now, y'all know they don't exist anymore, but it was Pan American Airlines, and they marched right up. There's a big, long line and all this customs and stuff. And we marched right up to the front. You don't realize what's going on when you're in the presence of angels. You just don't know it. It's just all happening, and you're just along for the ride. And we marched right up to the front of the counter, and she said, Janine's going to need to call Arthur Chefsøy, that was my family back in Norway, that she won't be able to arrive at the appointed time, which they expected it to be 6 hours from that moment, and it was going to be like 18 or something like that, because I had missed the first flight. And so I called Arthur. They didn't even dial the phone. They picked it up, and he was on the line, and I started talking to him, didn't even realize something strange just happened. Nobody dialed the phone. And she'll need her ticket, and she'll need her passport, and it all just manifested, and there it all was right there. They just handed it to me, and it just showed up. And then they walked me back to where I was going to sit in the terminal, and they said, somebody will come along and feed you in just a minute. So this portly looking guy who had the curly hair, who had been in the taxi cab, walks up all happy like, I'm going to take you to get something to eat. Well, we sat down in a restaurant there in London's Heathrow International Airport while I'm waiting on my flight. And at this point, that sweet old lady, and Lurch, they were gone. And I was with this guy. He said, my name is Gary. You can call me Gary. Tell me about your brother Brad. Now, I didn't find that strange either, but my brother Brad had been murdered 18 months earlier. It didn't even occur to me. How did you know anything about Brad? Tell me about your brother Brad. And I started to say, oh, we were kindred spirits. I loved my brother Brad, and he loved me. And Gary didn't eat anything, and I didn't find that strange at the time, but he didn't eat anything, and I was eating like a little piggy because now it's almost 24 hours since that big feast in the room. And I just told him all about Gary, and he said some things about Brad. He said, Brad's doing great. He's a good friend of mine. I'm like, you knew Brad? I know Brad. And I didn't think that was strange either. But then this Gary guy said, okay, it's time for us to get back to the terminal so you won't miss your flight. And so we walked back to the terminal, and I sat where I was. And now, we are not the only people in the terminal at Heathrow International Airport. We were not. And there were a bunch of people. There was this one heavyset black woman who was kind of walking up to the terminal with us. And then suddenly Gary got in front of us, turned around in front of us and said, you know, you have to go to gate C and your flight will be in 15 minutes, so you head that way directly. It's time for me to take my flight, he said. And he's walking backwards, and this black lady and myself are walking, looking at him. And Gary waves, and he says, it's time for me to take my flight, and disappeared. The woman next to me said, oh, there was a man just there. There was a man just there. And 2 or 3 other people stopped. The whole terminal froze. There was a man just there. The veil was lifted from my eyes, and I realized what I had just experienced. Of course, later when I got back to Norway, I was able to show my family members all those little bottles from the Rolls-Royce limousine, and I had my passport and how it had been stamped and everything, and they had never done that in my presence. And at one point in the story, Gary he said, you're going to need some money. And he gave me 500 English pounds. And I showed them the money, the pounds, and they were like, where did you get all this money? Did you steal? No, Gary gave it to me. He said, I need money. And after something like that transpires, you wonder if you're nuts. Did I make all that up? You second guess yourself. You wonder if you're crazy. And then things continuously show you through the grace of God that happens every day. You're not crazy. This is just the character of God. That's not the only amazing experience I've had, but I would have to say that was the big one. I mean, it transpired over a day and a half. When I was a Mormon, I used to say, I've had the most profound angel experience of anything I've ever heard next to Joseph Smith. So, but this is just the grace of God, and thank you for letting me tell you. Thank you for not thinking I'm crazy and for knowing these things really do transpire when we need it. Because what's really going on is all the stuff we can't see. Thank you, grace of God. Thank you for the daily grace, for the miraculous transformations, for breaking bindings that bind us and hold us. Thank you. We offer gratitude and thanksgiving. And so it is.